My husband thought he could humiliate me in front of his entire company and I'd just take it. He didn't know I'd been building a case for months. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 36 years old. I work in operations consulting, which basically means I solve problems behind the scenes. I'm not flashy, I'm not loud. I don't walk into rooms expecting anyone to notice me, and most of the time, they don't. That's fine. I've always been comfortable in the background. But in my marriage, being in the background meant something different. It meant being expected to smile, nod, and never make waves, especially when it came to my husband's work circle. His name is Grant. He's a senior director at a large logistics firm, and in his world, image is everything. I was part of that image, the supportive wife, the quiet plus one at corporate dinners, the woman who laughed at the right jokes and never, ever disagreed with him in public. For years, I played that role. I told myself it was compromise. I told myself marriage means sometimes swallowing your pride to keep things smooth. But somewhere along the way, compromise turned into erasure. I stopped being Emily and became Grant's wife. That's it, that's all. The hardest part wasn't the silence, it was the loneliness inside the silence. Sitting at a table surrounded by people and feeling completely invisible. Being corrected in front of strangers over the smallest things. The way I ordered food, the stories I told, even the way I laughed. He'd shoot me a look and I'd shrink, every single time. I wasn't powerful or glamorous, but I had something they didn't expect. Now, before I go on, I want to pause for just a moment. If you've ever been in a situation where someone made you feel small, where your voice was taken from you in a room full of people, then this story is for you. If you've ever been underestimated or silenced, whether at work, at home, or both, I want you to know you're not alone. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already, because this channel is for people who refuse to stay quiet forever. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself when everyone expected you to stay down? Think about that. And if this story speaks to you, hit that like button or click hype to show your support before we continue. It started at Grant's holiday party. The venue was one of those converted warehouse spaces downtown. Exposed brick walls, string lights draped across the ceiling, long tables with white linen and centerpieces that probably cost more than my weekly groceries. The smell of roasted garlic and expensive wine hung in the air. Jazz music played softly from speakers hidden somewhere in the rafters. Everyone was there. Coworkers, their spouses, middle management, senior leadership, even a few board members lingering near the bar. Grant was in his element, loud, charming, holding court at the center of a group of men, drink in hand, telling a story I'd heard 14 times. I stood beside him, doing what I always did, smiling, nodding, existing as decoration. The trouble started over something so small it almost doesn't matter. A coworker asked me what I thought about a recent supply chain issue that had been in the news. It was literally my field, operations consulting. So I answered. I gave a thoughtful, informed opinion, nothing controversial, nothing aggressive. Just a professional woman answering a professional question. Grant's face changed. I saw it happen in real time. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed. He waited until there was a brief pause in conversation, and then he cut in. Emily doesn't really follow the details on that stuff, he said with a tight smile. She's more of a big-picture thinker, aren't you, babe? I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. A few people looked down at their plates. The coworker who'd asked me the question suddenly became very interested in his bread roll. I could have let it go. I almost did. But something inside me, something tired and bruised and sick of being edited, pushed back. Actually, I do follow the details, I said calmly. It's literally what I do for a living, Grant. The table went quiet. Grant stared at me, not with surprise, with fury. Cold, controlled fury, the kind he saved for moments when he felt his authority was being challenged. He set his glass down slowly. "Say sorry right now or you're done here," he said. His voice was loud, deliberately loud, loud enough for the tables on either side of us to hear. Plates froze mid-air. Laughter died at the neighboring tables. A woman 2 seats down whispered my name to her husband. "Apologize for what?" I asked quietly. "For embarrassing me," he said through his teeth. "In front of my colleagues, again." I looked around. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke up. People I'd known for years, people who'd been to our home for dinner, sat there like statues. Some looked uncomfortable. Most just looked away. But I noticed something else. Near the entrance, 2 members of the HR team stood together, and they looked tense. One of them, a woman named Diane, was staring directly at Grant with an expression I couldn't quite read. The other was quietly typing on his phone under the table, his thumbs moving fast. Before I could respond to Grant, the main doors opened, and the CEO, Richard Ames, walked in. He wasn't alone. He was holding a thick manila file, and his face carried the kind of grim seriousness that makes an entire room hold its breath. I didn't know what was in that file, not yet, but something in my chest shifted, a feeling I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't hope exactly, it was recognition, like watching a fuse you lit weeks ago finally reach the powder. After the party, Grant rewrote the entire evening. He was gifted at that. By the time we got home, the story had completely changed. "You humiliated me," he said, pacing the kitchen. "In front of Richard Ames. In front of the entire leadership team. Do you understand what you've done?" I answered a question, Grant. "You contradicted me, publicly. You made me look weak." He said it like those were the same thing, like my having a voice was an attack on his strength. And then he did what he always did. He called people. His mother, his best friend from work, his buddy on the leadership team. By morning, every single one of them had the same version of events. Emily caused a scene. Emily was out of control. Emily embarrassed poor Grant at his own company party. Within a week, I was excluded. The next corporate dinner invitation came addressed only to him. A team-building weekend trip, one I'd attended 3 years in a row, suddenly had limited spots. Grant told me leadership thought it would be better for everyone if I stayed home for a while. "They agree with me, Emily," he said one evening, not even looking up at his laptop. "You're a liability." A liability. His wife. The woman who'd proofread his presentations, coached him through promotion interviews, hosted his boss for Thanksgiving dinner twice. A liability. I felt the walls closing in. His coworkers avoided eye contact with me at the grocery store. His mother called to tell me I should think about what kind of wife I wanted to be. Even my own sister said maybe I should just apologize and move on. But something was happening inside me that none of them could see. The loneliness, the humiliation, the constant rewriting of reality, it wasn't breaking me anymore. It was clarifying things. I started writing things down. Dates, conversations, exact words. I saved text messages instead of deleting them. I screenshotted emails he forwarded me where colleagues made offhand comments about keeping spouses in line. I kept a notebook in my car, and every evening after a fight, I'd sit in the driveway and write down exactly what had been said and done. I wasn't building a case, not yet. I was just trying to hold on to what was real. Because when someone rewrites your reality every single day, you start to doubt your own memory. The notebook was my anchor. It kept me sane. Here's what nobody knew. I'd been keeping those records for over a year, not because I had some master plan, because a woman I respected deeply once told me something I never forgot. Her name was Dr. Carolyn Beck. She was a corporate ethics professor I'd met at a conference 3 years earlier. We stayed in touch, mostly through email. One day, after I'd vented to her about a particularly bad fight with Grant, she said something that stuck with me like a splinter. "Emily, when someone uses institutional power to control personal relationships, the institution needs to know. Write it down. All of it. dates, names, context. Not because you're going to use it tomorrow, but because one day you might need someone to believe you, and memory alone won't be enough. So I wrote, and I kept writing. And what none of them knew, not Grant, not his friends in leadership, not his mother who called me difficult, was that HR already knew my name. I had sent a preliminary inquiry to Diane in HR 8 months before the party. Nothing formal, just a question about company policy regarding spousal conduct at corporate events and whether patterns of public intimidation fell under their harassment guidelines. Diane had responded carefully, professionally, and she'd kept the correspondence on file. What Grant didn't realize was that the night of the party wasn't the beginning of anything. It was the end. The moment he stood up in front of 50 people and told his wife to apologize or be cut off, he didn't just cross a line. He performed his abuse in front of witnesses who were already watching. There's more going on behind the scenes than he ever imagined, and the wheels were already turning. The person who helped me understand what to do next was someone I'd known for almost a decade. Her name was Patricia Vaughn, and she was a senior consultant I'd worked with early in my career. Pat was in her late 50s, sharp as a blade, and she had spent 20 years navigating corporate environments where power was routinely abused. She'd seen it all: the cover-ups, the retaliation, the quiet firings disguised as restructuring. When I called her the week after the party, she didn't waste time with sympathy. "Tell me exactly what happened," she said, word for word. So I did. I read her my notes. I showed her the emails. I walked her through the pattern, not just the party, but the months of exclusion, the reputation damage, the threats. Pat was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Emily, this isn't a marital dispute. This is workplace misconduct. He used his position in the company to publicly intimidate and silence you. He used company events, company relationships, and company culture as weapons. That's not a marriage problem. That's a policy violation." She helped me understand the company's code of conduct, which I pulled up online. Section 4, subsection 3. It explicitly stated that employees were expected to maintain professional and respectful behavior at all company-sponsored events, and that this expectation extended to the treatment of guests, including spouses and partners. Threatening, demeaning, or intimidating conduct was listed as a reportable offense. Pat helped me organize my documentation. The notebook entries became a timeline. The screenshots became exhibits. The email from Diane became proof that HR had been made aware and that a pattern had been flagged. "You're not doing anything wrong," Pat told me. "You're using the system the way it was designed to be used. He just never thought you would." And she was right. Grant was confident, completely, blindingly confident. He walked around the house like a man who had already won. He made jokes about the party at dinner. He told his mother I'd calmed down. He even started planning the next corporate event, a quarterly leadership summit, and casually mentioned I wasn't invited. "It's better this way," he said, buttering his toast without looking at me. "Less stress for both of us." I said nothing. I just sipped my coffee and let him believe he was in control. The leadership summit was held 6 weeks after the holiday party. It took place in the company's main conference center, a sleek glass-walled room on the 14th floor of their downtown office. About 40 people were present: senior directors, VPs, HR representatives, and the executive team. It was supposed to be a routine quarterly review: budgets, projections, team performance. I wasn't there. I wasn't invited, and I didn't need to be. But Diane from HR was, and Richard Ames, the CEO, was. The meeting started normally. Reports were given, slides were clicked through, coffee was poured and reheated. And then, about 90 minutes in, Richard Ames stood up. "Before we close," he said, "there's a matter I need to address. It's been brought to my attention through a formal complaint filed with HR. And after a thorough review, I'm not comfortable tabling it. The room shifted. People sat up straighter. Grant, sitting near the middle of the long table, looked curious but unconcerned. He even leaned back in his chair slightly, the way he always did when he felt comfortable in a room. Richard opened the manila file, the same one he'd been carrying the night of the party. "This is a 3-page formal complaint," he said, "supported by documented evidence, including emails, dated personal records, and witness statements from the December holiday event." Grant's posture changed, just slightly. His shoulders pulled inward, his fingers stopped tapping on the table. The complaint details a pattern of public intimidation, verbal aggression, and the deliberate exclusion of a family member from company events as a form of retaliation, Richard continued. "It involves conduct that directly violates our Code of Conduct, Section 4, Subsection 3. Someone across the table glanced at Grant. Then another. Then another. "I'm going to read a few key excerpts," Richard said. He read the first one. It was from the holiday party. A direct account of Grant standing up and telling me to apologize or be done here. 2 witnesses had corroborated the account independently. Their statements matched almost word for word. He read the second excerpt, an email Grant had sent to a colleague the morning after the party, in which he referred to me as a problem that needs managing, and asked the colleague to support limiting Emily's access to future events. Grant's face went white. The third excerpt was from my notebook, a dated entry from 5 months before the party, describing an incident where Grant had grabbed my arm in the parking lot after a company dinner and told me if I ever spoke out of turn again, he'd make sure I wasn't welcome anywhere. These records were submitted voluntarily by the complainant, Richard said. They were reviewed by our HR team and verified against internal communications and event records. He looked directly at Grant. "Grant, do you have a response?" The room was so silent I was told you could hear the ventilation system humming in the walls. 40 people, staring, waiting. Grant opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "This is personal," he said finally. "This is between me and my wife. It stopped being personal when you did it at company events, using your company title, in front of company employees," Richard said. "That makes it our business." Diane from HR spoke next. "We've completed a preliminary investigation. Based on the evidence, we're recommending formal disciplinary action, including suspension of leadership privileges and mandatory behavioral counseling. Further steps will depend on the outcome of a full review." Grant looked around the room, searching for an ally, searching for someone to back him up, to tell Richard this was an overreaction, to say Emily was the problem. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The same people who'd sat frozen at the holiday party sat frozen again, but this time they weren't frozen out of awkwardness. They were frozen because they knew. The meeting ended shortly after. I heard about it that evening from Diane, who called me personally. "It's done, Emily," she said. "He knows." I didn't celebrate. I didn't cry. I sat on the edge of my bed in the quiet apartment I'd moved into 2 weeks earlier, and I just breathed. Deep, slow breaths that filled my lungs completely for what felt like the first time in years. Grant called me that night. I didn't answer. He called again, and again. He left a voicemail that started angry and ended pleading. He said I'd ruined his career. He said I'd humiliated him. He said I'd broken our family. I listened to it once, then deleted it. Over the following weeks, things unfolded the way they needed to. Grant was suspended from his leadership role pending a full HR review. 2 other employees came forward with their own accounts of his aggressive behavior, incidents that had been whispered about for years but never reported. The company launched a broader review of its event conduct policies. Grant's mother called me, not to apologize, to tell me I'd destroyed her son's life. I let her talk for about 30 seconds, then I said, "Your son destroyed his own life. I just stopped covering for him." She hung up. My sister called too. This time she didn't tell me to apologize. She said, "I'm sorry I didn't listen sooner." That one mattered. I filed for divorce on a Tuesday morning. The air outside was cold and sharp. and it smelled like rain and wet pavement. I walked out of the attorney's office and stood on the sidewalk and felt the wind hit my face, and I thought, this is what it feels like to choose yourself. The process wasn't easy, divorce never is, but it was clear. I wasn't running away, I was walking toward something, toward a life where my voice wasn't edited, where my opinions weren't liabilities, where I could answer a question at a dinner table without being punished for it. Grant faced professional consequences that followed him. The suspension became a demotion. The demotion became a resignation when it was clear his reputation in the company was beyond repair. I don't know where he works now. I don't need to. His friends, the ones who'd helped him rewrite reality, went quiet. Some of them sent me awkward texts months later. Hey, hope you're dealing well. I didn't respond to most of them. Silence from people who watched you suffer doesn't get rewarded with grace when it's convenient for them. The family, his family, never fully came around, but they stopped calling, and honestly, that was its own kind of peace. I think about that night at the holiday party sometimes. The sound of his voice cutting through the room, the clink of forks stopping, the silence that swallowed everything. I used to replay it with shame. Now I replay it with something closer to gratitude, because that was the night he showed everyone exactly who he was. And it was the night I finally stopped hiding who I was. I wasn't loud. I wasn't dramatic. I didn't flip a table or make a speech. I just wrote things down. I told the truth, and I let the system do what it was supposed to do. If you're living in a situation where someone controls how you're seen, where someone rewrites what happened to make you the villain, where someone uses their power to keep you small, I want you to hear me. Write it down. Save the messages. Keep the records. Not because you're planning a war, but because the truth has weight, and one day you might need someone to feel it. You're not crazy. You're not too sensitive. You're not a liability. You are a person who deserves to be heard. Now, if this story hit home for you, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been humiliated publicly by someone who was supposed to protect you? Have you ever had to stand up when everyone expected you to sit down? Drop your story in the comments. You might be surprised how many people understand exactly what you went through. If this video meant something to you, please hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already, because this community is for people who refuse to be silenced. And click hype to help this story reach someone else who needs to hear it today. There's someone out there right now, sitting in their car writing in a notebook, wondering if anyone will ever believe them. Let's make sure they find this. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for being part of this. I'll see you in the next one.